All right, everyone, welcome, welcome. You can please take your seats. We'll get started as soon as we're all ready here. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the first Naturalist night of the season here at Hallam Lake of 2020. Just so you know, this microphone is just for the recording, so you shouldn't be hearing my voice anywhere else. I'm going to try to speak loud. Also, questions at the end, same deal, so make sure we're talking loud when we're sharing out. All right, so this is a free speaker series put on every week for the next 10 weeks. Collaboration between ACES here in Hallam Lake, the Roaring Fork Audubon and Wilderness Workshop. And our sponsors tonight, we have our featured sponsor, SGM, and other sponsors here. See, they pay for our speakers' travel expenses and also for the taping of Grassroots TV here tonight. So thank you to our sponsors. If you miss one of these evenings, we're at Wednesday nights in Carbondale and Thursdays here at Hallam Lake. They're also live streamed on Facebook on both the ACES page and the Wilderness Workshop page. Cool. Anything else? Yeah, and so to introduce our speaker tonight, we have Dr. Lauren Benedict. She's Associate Professor of Biological Sciences at University of Northern Colorado. She studies the vocalizations and behavior of wild birds, which we'll hear about tonight. She holds a BA in biology from Cornell and a doctorate in integrative biology from the University of California, Berkeley. And you can find her observing and audio recording birds on public lands of Colorado. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lauren Benedict.
Great. Oh yeah, okay, thank you, Gus. Yep, I got it. We'll get this rolling. Cool, okay. So thanks everybody for coming out and for having me. This is a pretty great speaker series to come to because you get to talk to enthusiastic audiences twice and you get to ski. So I really can't complain about that. It's awesome. And I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, so as Gus said, I'm an ornithologist. I teach about birds, I study birds, and I've been doing this for, 20-some years now. And I've discovered, what I really love is just watching birds and looking closely at their behaviors and trying to understand what they're doing. And I'm a birder. I like seeing lots of different birds, but really more than that, I'm interested in the individual kind of focused behaviors of birds. So when I go out and do research, I spend a lot of time looking at one bird for a very long time and sort of ignoring everything else around me and trying to understand what that bird is doing, why it does that, how that evolved, and how that contributes to the overall diversity that we see in the world. And so those are sort of the general questions that kind of inspire me. And as I have been journeying through my studies of birds over time, I've found myself really interested in particular in the songs that they sing and the sounds that they make. And birds, of course, sing. I'm sure you know this. We hear them all the time, and people love this, right? We're drawn to birds because of the sounds that they make. They're musical, they're melodic, they're beautiful, and we really kind of enjoy interacting with them in that way. And now, if you're a birder, or if you really spend a lot of time out there, you might find yourself listening to these songs, and if you were in Australia, you might see a scene like this, where you've got these two splendid fairy wrens, and on the left we have this male who's bright blue, and on the right we have his female, and the two of them are standing there together just belting out some tune. And I love this picture because she's really going for it, She's front and center singing that song. Around here in North America, you see that less often. Most of the time in North America, you see something like this. This is a house wren, very familiar bird, and if you are a birder and you look at this bird singing away, what do you assume this is, a male or a female?
Male.
Male. And it's interesting, when I ask this, birders always say, I assume it's male. When I ask an audience of people who are not birders, they say, I don't know, it could be either, right? But birders have learned, birders and ornithologists also have learned the dogma is males are the singers, females don't sing. And that's not actually the case. So I don't know. I just took this picture, this great picture from Wikimedia Commons here. I don't know if it's a male or female, but actually it could be either, because house wren females do sing. So how many people in the room are birders? Great. Okay, just so I know, and I assume everybody else here is a nature enthusiast of some kind because you're here. So I'll try and make sure that I talk to the birders, but also to people who might not have those same assumptions that birders have, that males are the only singers. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk to you a little while about song, about bird song, and in particular about females singing. And so first I'll try and explain why I think we should care about this. Why should we even be interested in female singing? Why should we be studying them? And then I'll talk a little bit about how do we even define song, which is a very murky question in and of itself. I'll give you some examples of female song, species in which we know that females do sing. And then I'm going to hopefully inspire you to get involved, because citizen scientists, I think, are really important in helping us document all of the songs of birds that are out there. And if citizen scientists are more aware of female song, we're going to have better documentation. So that is kind of the goal of what we're doing today. So first of all, why do I care about song? Why should anybody care about song? Why is bird song interesting? Bird song has been studied for a very long time because it is in nature what we think is the best analog for human language. It is complex. It has syntax. It is learned by many species over time. So young birds of songbirds and parrots and other things go through the same stages that a baby goes through, where they have kind of a babbling stage, and then it crystallizes, and then they start to sing the things that match the adult types, order them in certain ways, they use them in certain contexts. So it has this really sort of interesting complexity. And all of that then creates a very, very diverse set of bird sounds out there in the world, which you all, I'm sure, are familiar with. It's pretty amazing to me that you can listen to a bird singing. You can just hear the sound, and you can tell from that sound so much about what is happening with that bird. Even if you don't see that bird, you can know, okay, I know what species that is. And there are hundreds of species that you might be hearing, and yet you can identify 2 species based on the sound that it makes. You can know where it is. Obviously, they're indicating the location, and sometimes more in depth, they're indicating location of their territory or location of a potential mating site or something else. You can know how old that bird is. Young birds and old birds sometimes sound slightly different, so young birds often don't sound quite right. If you're a birder, the birders are nodding, right? Because they're sort of learning, and you can tell, again, this whole idea that song is analogous to language, they have to learn to completely get it right. You can tell pairing status. So that bird might be saying, I'm looking for a mate, or it might be saying, nope, I'm good, I've got a mate, this is just defending my space. They're telling you something about the social system and their social lives and what's happening at the time. And you can tell levels of aggression. So birds use very different types of sounds or songs or song features to indicate when they are angry and ready to fight. Song can be a very good indicator of a coming attack from a particular bird. Finally, you can sometimes tell individual quality. We're maybe not as good at this, but we think that other birds are very good at this. A lot of the choice of mates among birds is based on song and song quality. So the bird with the very best song is the one that gets the most mates, or maybe also the highest quality mate. And therefore, this information, there's so much information in these sounds. And these sounds have then been a huge area of study because we can learn so much about evolution and ecology and animal diversity from them. In addition, sometimes you can tell sex. And we don't know for sure in all species that you can always tell sex, but there are lots of species in which song indicates sex. There are others in which song is the same among the sexes. And so this is something that I want you all to think about and be aware of. And female song, though. Why am I talking today about female song? Well, there's been a ton of awesome work done on all of those things I just told you, on how song quality helps you get a mate, or how song indicates aggression. But 95 to 99%, and I'm guesstimating here, but I think it's a pretty good estimate, of that research has been done on males. Almost entirely on male birds. And a lot of this is because much of the sort of Western research canon originated in North America with research institutions and in those places. And in those places, in temperate areas, males do sing more than females. So around here, there are plenty of species in which only males sing. And there are plenty of species in which males and females both sing, but males sing more. And it seems to be that sort of this is the trend in temperate areas, but it's not the trend everywhere. And this bias, or this thinking that we have that only males sing, has really come out of that history of ornithology, but it's not entirely true. And we're missing out on a whole lot of birdsong that's happening, and a whole lot of birdsong that's probably conveying something different and functioning in a slightly different way than all of those male songs do. So I'm claiming here we're only hearing half the melody amongst all the birds. So my main point today is that I think we really, if we want to understand birdsong as an analog of human language, or even just as a complex system that has developed in nature, and try and understand how that happens, we need to study both the males and the females. So I think we should be doing that. The question is, how much female song is there actually out there to study? Because this bias that male song, that females don't sing, does have a root somewhere, right? There is truth to the pattern that males sing more than females, particularly in North America and other areas. So how much female song have we actually got out there in the world? Well, that's a good question. We've tried to put a number on it, I and lots of colleagues, and much of the numbers I'm giving you and the data I'm giving you has come from research done by many other wonderful biologists too. I don't want to claim that I've collected all of the data in this talk. But all of this work has given us some numbers. So we have some estimates of how many species there are in which females do sing. So before I show you, I'm going to show you a graph for just songbirds, so perching, passerine birds, all the little tweeting songbirds. What percentage of species have female song? Before I show you the graph, I'll let you make an estimate. You can guess out loud, or you can guess in your head, whatever you want to do. What percentage of birds do you think females sing in?
40%.
Yeah, good guesses, lots of good guesses. So here's the number that scientists have come up with. About 40 was good, 70 was good, 65% or so. About 2/3 of species, right? And that means that there are still, about a third of species in which female song is absent, as far as we know. And I do believe those reports. For example, one of the species I study is rock wrens. And I've spent a lot of time observing a lot of individual rock wrens, and I have not seen a female sing. So there are species in which females don't sing. But in the majority of species, females do sing. Okay, I told you already that in temperate areas like North America, it's less common, sort of across the world. If you think about it, most birds in the world live in tropical areas, right? Bird density and bird diversity is higher in tropical places. So in temperate areas, so this reflects that bias, that there are more singing females in tropical areas. But even in temperate areas, we have good amounts of female song. So if you look in Europe and the US and Canada, these are the estimates. About 40% or more than 40% of species have reported female song. So for all those songbirds that you're hearing out there in the woods every time you guys take a walk or lead a walk, keep that in mind, that almost half of them, females might be singing. Who are the species that are more likely to have female song? As I said, they don't all have it, but in the ones that do, scientists have found some trends, some suggestions of features of these birds in which that seem to drive female song, or promote it at least. First of all, as I said, it's more common in tropical areas. And we'll think about that first. So if we look at this sort of idea of tropical birds, in tropical areas, this is where you get the species in which female song is really very prevalent. And there are species in which females sing more than males, which, if you're a birder in North America, seems like kind of a crazy idea to you. If you're not a birder, that might not seem crazy to you. But again, if you're a birder, there's this dogma that we're sort of working with, and it's often surprising to birders. So in this Australian magpie, females sing more than males. And in these superb fairy wrens, same thing. And these are just a couple of examples where this happens. And they use song in lots of similar ways, males and females. In non-tropical areas, we don't usually see females singing more than males, but we still see these trends that they sing regularly. And often the ones that sing, the species that sing more often, are monogamous, territorial, and non-migratory. So males and females have pretty similar sex roles, right? They're doing the same things. They're both feeding babies. They're both defending that territory. They're not migrating, so that migration doesn't put a stress on them to reestablish a new territory every year. And those factors seem to promote female song, females and males singing in similar ways. So who are some of our monogamous territorial non-migratory species in North America? The most famous female singer in North America is probably the northern cardinal. Have some of you guys heard that northern cardinal females sing? I don't know if you have. They're super easy to tell. You can look at a cardinal, and because they're dimorphic, you can tell if you're looking at a male or a female, and therefore people have really well documented that females sing in this species, and females sing a lot in northern cardinals. So if you go east and you watch cardinals, they're really fun, and it's great to watch them sing. American dippers are another species, a fun local species. And there is not great data on dippers, but it has been suggested, the Birds of North America report, which is the ultimate source of information for birds of North America, suggests that in this species, males might sing as much as females, or females might sing as much as males do. It might be equivalent between the sexes. So this is one that really needs study. If anybody's looking for a research project, yes, go get the dippers. They're tricky, right? You'd have to band them. You'd have to put colored bands or some other identification markers on them because males and females look the same. And that's always one of the challenges with trying to figure out if you're hearing female song, is that in a species where males and females look the same, you have to really look for other clues. So you can look to see, okay, did that bird build a nest? And maybe in this species only females build the nest. It built the nest and then it sang. That might be a female. In a dipper, yeah, you would have to look for some other clues to help you figure that out. Some other examples, female song sparrows sing. This one is less common. Males do the vast majority of the singing, but females are known to sing, and interestingly, they sing in years when the population density is really high and their territory is more likely to be invaded. So that promotes female song. And then, and the other fact about song sparrows that I think is really fun is that people have known that females sing for a very long time. Margaret Morse Nice, in a classic book in the 1940s on song sparrows, she wrote the treatise on song sparrows, and she said, I had some singing females, but she didn't make much of it. And she and everyone else at the time refers to female song as aberrant in these species. That's always the word, aberrant. Like it was just a mistake that this one female sang, when in fact, multiple people have documented it multiple times, so it seems like a consistent pattern. Perhaps it's worth looking into. Okay, another fun one, orioles sing a lot. And these don't fit the pattern perfectly because many orioles are migratory, but lots of oriole species, most of the oriole species in North America have a good amount of female song. Yep, so these are a good number, or a good examples of local females. Okay, why else should we care about female song? So it's pretty widespread. In addition, it's got a really interesting evolutionary history. If we think about song, often there's this tendency to look at males and females and see an elaborate song by the male and think, oh, wow, he got really fancy. Why did he evolve that way, to be fancy? And that, it turns out, might not be the right question, because in the majority of songbird lineages that are evolutionary very old, females sang too. So maybe the question is, why did females get less elaborate or less loud? And the way that researchers have figured this out is really cool. They looked at these groups that are kind of the earliest branching among all of our passerines songbirds. And these groups here, many of them are Australasian, and some have wider distributions. So you'll notice vireos and shrikes, of course, occur in North America, but also have an Australasian origin. We think the original passerine bird probably arose in Australia, and then they diversified from there. Yep. So if you look at the ancestral history and map song onto it, you can make this inference about how that ancestor might or might not have sung. It's really cool, right? Behaviors don't fossilize. So how do you look at behavior through evolutionary time? You do it by mapping it onto the evolutionary tree. And so that's what these researchers did. Here, this diagram shows you the evolutionary tree. It's a little complicated here. I can walk you through it. So every dot around the outside is a currently extant species, right? These are all of our existing species, and each little split point here is when two species branched off, and the deepest point here is that theoretical ancestor of all of our passerines. So there was an ancestor here, and then it split into a lineage of everybody, plus this one group over here. And then these splits continue, and eventually you generate all these species by mapping either female song absent in blue or present in red, and then using that information with fancy algorithms that give you predictive sort of probabilities that different ancestors sang. You end up with this pie chart at the middle, and this is the probability that that ancestor sang. So, did the ancestors of female passerines sing? Very high likelihood, right? And because of that, we now know that singing by both sexes was the norm in evolutionary history, and through time, it's been lost in all of our temperate zone birds. So all those tropical birds that are still singing, they're the ones that are more like that ancestor. They're showing those traits of the ancestor, and then something happened evolutionarily with all the birds in temperate zones, and it probably has to do with migration. Migration is hard. It allows you to access new resources, but you have to spend a lot of energy in migration, and with migration came more diversification of sex roles, so males do more of the resource defense, territory defense, setting up a territory. They get here earlier. They set up that territory. Females do more of the offspring care. And in that way, then, the song, females seem to have lost song. Maybe it wasn't as important for them since males were doing all of the work with their song, essentially. Yeah. Okay, so why should we care about female song? Well, two big reasons. It's widespread, and it's evolutionarily very old. It's the ancestral state for all of our songbirds. Okay, cool. Females are singing. How do we define female song? So if we're gonna study female song, we've decided, hopefully, yeah, sure, we should study female song, yeah. How do we do that? What are we looking for? What is female song? And this can be a contentious issue. Again, if anyone has ever been out there, listening to birds, and they make lots of noises. What makes something a song? And ornithologists have debated this. There are so many definitions out in the world. Some of those definitions say it's the vocalization that a male makes when he sets up his territory. Others don't include all of those details. I wrote an article with a colleague of mine, Karen Odom, and we proposed this definition. So we said, a song is any long, complex vocalization given by birds, especially during resource defense or mate attraction situations. Maybe. We like this definition. It still distinguishes songs from calls. Calls are all of the other sounds birds make, sometimes just to keep in contact, or the begging of offspring. Calls are typically shorter, and they occur in a wide range of different contexts. It also isn't sex-specific, so males or females could therefore have song under this definition. And then it's not confined to songbirds. And this is a point I haven't really hit yet, because I have been talking mostly about songbirds, but there are lots of birds out there that make wonderful, complex vocalizations that some people refuse to call song because that bird is not in the lineage of songbirds. It's not in the group of passerines. I don't actually care if you call it a song or if you don't, but what I care about is that you recognize that it's a potentially important vocalization that has an effect on that bird's success in life, and it's probably therefore worth trying to understand how it functions and thinking about the form and function of that complex vocalization. So hopefully that's a sort of reasonable way to approach this. And I have to say, we're not the only people who are converting definitions so that they no longer include mention of sex in them. This is the latest version of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Handbook of Bird Biology, which is a great book. It has a really great Bird Academy website that goes along with it. If you're looking for fun online activities and tutorials and just places or things to learn about birds, go to Bird Academy from the Cornell Lab is awesome. But their definition is song is an often loud and sometimes complex vocalization used to attract mates or compete with members of the same sex. So we were really pleased to see that this does not have sex. Well, it has the word sex, but it is not limited only to males in this situation. So Who are some species? How are we defining female song? Well, those definitions, if you noticed, include both information about the form, so it's kind of a long, kind of a complex thing, and the function. And we'll start with form. Let's think about the form of some bird songs for a few minutes here. This is a bird that hopefully is familiar. This is a dark-eyed junco. The ones around here don't always look exactly like that, but you know, different variants, all one species. Sounds like this. Go again. There we go. And this has long been referred to, this trill is what we often think of as the song of a dark-eyed junco. Males sing this all the time. Females also sing this. So if you've heard a dark-eyed junco trilling, it's probably a male, but it might be a female. And in particular, there's research that has shown that females sing it in contest situations where they're more likely to sing this trill if there's another female nearby invading their space. So they don't sing it as much spontaneously as a male does, but in certain situations females sing it. And acoustically, it is indistinguishable between the two sexes. Here's another one. This is probably a familiar bird. Black-capped chickadee. They're everywhere, right? They have these classic songs. Black-capped chickadees are tricky. Their song is that fee-bee. Their calls, chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, are actually much more complicated than their songs. So this is one where that definition, according to form, is a little bit fluid, but everyone has labeled this fee-bee sound their song. So here's what it sounds like. Yep. I'm sure that's familiar. You hear it particularly in the spring, right? And that's why this is called the song, because they use it in setting up territories and attracting mates. It's really initiating the breeding season. This fee-bee song is sung by males and females. And again, this is one where a lot of people assume that it's a male when they hear it, but females sound just like males. By ear, I certainly can't tell them apart. There have been some papers that have done, fancy mathematical algorithms, and they've measured a whole bunch of things, and they've figured it out that, yeah, they're slightly different, but it's really hard to tell. By ear, you'll never get that. I also have to point out this particular recording came from Zeno Canto. I just downloaded it. It was recorded by Ted Floyd, who some of you may know, who's a local birder extraordinaire. And when he put it into Zeno Canto, he uploaded it. There are boxes you can check in there that say, where did you record it? When did you record it? Is it a male or a female? And he checked unknown. And I really appreciate that because he realized that it could be either, and he did not have great evidence that it was male or female. Okay, here's another one. This is a species that I study. So this is a canyon wren, which has a wonderful song. Here's a bird. They skid up there on the cliffs and the canyons, and they sing. We're going to be looking at a few of these sort of for the next section of the talk. And when I study song, a lot of what I do is I listen to the songs, but then I record them and I make visualizations of them. So this is what's called a spectrogram, where you have time here on the x-axis, audio frequency on the y, so high-pitched notes, low-pitched notes. And then the darkness of the mark indicates how loud it is, how much energy it has. So this is essentially a visual representation of a sound. So if we play the sound, there we go. Does that make sense? And you can see how those clear notes are represented, and then the sort of harsh broadband sounds are these broad ones. Okay, so we can visualize sound. If we hear that or see that, is that a male or a female? That one's male. And he's telling you that very clearly because that song is only sung by males. But sometimes you see or hear a song like this. I know, I keep asking these trick questions, don't I? It looks like this. Is this one? This one's going to sound different, right? Because it looks different. Yeah. There we go. So that's a female canyon wren. And I would claim that this falls under the definition of song. It's fairly long, it's fairly complex, In addition, I've done a bunch of research on this, and I and my students, and we've determined that they do use this in those contexts that we said were important. We don't know that they use it to attract mates, but we know that they certainly use it to defend resources. Because if you challenge a female canyon wren with another female canyon wren song, so we do this. This is a lot of what my research entails. I go out there with speakers, I play sounds to birds, I see how they respond, and that gives me a clue about what that sound means to them, essentially. If you simulate an intruder female canyon wren on the territory of a female canyon wren, she comes at you immediately and sings this right back at you. She doesn't sing it very often spontaneously. It's pretty rare to hear it out there without that situation, but in that moment where her territory is being challenged, she uses it, very aggressively and very reliably. They all do it. So although this is a rare signal, I think it's really important functionally. They're using it to defend that territory, which is critical to them being successful in reproducing and having offspring and surviving through the next year. So back to that idea that, song is aberrant. Canyon wren females do this rarely, but I think that rareness does not make it unimportant. It's just that it's only important in certain contexts, and if you're not watching at the right moment or in the right context, then you don't necessarily see that behavior. So again, that goes back to this idea that I love watching birds for sort of long periods of time to really understand what that one bird is doing over a long time course. And seeing then these moments which don't happen frequently, but have critical function. Okay, so there are all sorts of other really cool vocalizations that females give. As I said before, I don't think that song should be only from songbirds. Here's a barred owl. They make great noises, and in fact, they duet. So males and females sing these overlapping sounds together. Here's a spectrogram of it, and it just kind of looks like a mess on the spectrogram, right? It's all on top of each other, and you can't tell who's who. It sounds like this. Yeah. So you can hear there's one bird doing this sort of hoo, 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 and then the other cackling on top of it. Yep. If we outline in red the female and in blue the male, the female's doing the low-pitched, the bass line, and the male's the one up on top of it. So if I play it again, yeah, that's her hoo, 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 and the up above. And you can see how they're combining them. And they reliably combine those sounds, the same types of sounds in the same kind of way. And the female's really the one sort of driving that song, right? She's laying down the bass line and he's playing on top of it. There are other duetting birds that do all kinds of fascinating duets in which males and females are both really important. They're both contributing important parts to this. So some of the most famous and kind of most amazing duetting species are wrens that you find in Central and South America, generally tropical species. Here are two examples that have been well studied by other researchers. The first one here is the Rufus and white wren. And again, I'm showing you a spectrogram so you can see male has a part and then the female joins in. And then the female will sing a section and then the male will sing a section and the male will sing a section. And duetting birds in general, in some species, one always follows, and in other species, they might go back and forth. In Rufus and white wrens, female might start, male might start. They have sort of equal parts to play in this duet, but they do sound slightly different. It sounds like this. Beautiful, right?
Play again.
Play it again, yep. So the females are doing that whoop, and the male just had a little doo-doo at the end of his, kind of. Yeah, really neat. And they can vary up the timing on that and how long they do it for and exactly who starts and when they overlap or don't overlap. Other species have much more fixed timing, and the most amazing of these are other of these wrens. So the happy wren is an example of one of these species. Yeah, I know, happy wren, there's great names on these. Where only because other researchers have done an excellent job of studying this do I know that you can break this down into the female and male parts. If I were to be out there hearing this, I would never know this was two birds. Unless you happen to be between them, you would think this is a single bird. You can see on the spectrogram here, right? Male has this kind of complicated phrase, and then there's the female phrase that follows, then the male, then the female, and it goes back and forth with just impeccable timing, perfect timing. And this one sounds like this.
Wow.
Pretty impressive, right? How they can coordinate that in time. Yep. Yep, and it's super fast. It's microsecond timing. People have looked at the brains of some of these really precisely duetting species, and they find that their brains are firing for every sound that either they or their partner makes. So they're having to track it all, right? And they're actually going through sort of the similar neural process for both their part and their partner's part, and yet they're only singing half of it. Yeah, really cool. Want to hear that one again too?
Yes.
Right? And the one place they overlap, I really can't hear all the details. That's why I wasn't following it super hard, but I can hear there's a sort of tick, 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 like there's a moment where it does that, and you can tell that's the male ending his phrase and the female on top of it starting at the same time. So, yep. Yeah, really fascinating things. And in a lot of these duetting species, males and females are contributing, again, equally to the duet. So both sexes are super important. And it's really important for them in their pair bonding and in their resource defense and in lots of other aspects of what they do as birds. Okay, so we know that female song can have really complex form, interesting form, similar to males. In addition, we know that female song has functions that are quite similar to male song function. Here's a species, the alpine accentor, and in this species, females sing to attract mates, which is exactly what most male song is used for. And we know that not only do they sing to attract mates, but the males are really listening to quality and detail of that song, because females that have more complex songs are higher quality females. They're laying more eggs in their clutch, and they're probably attracting mates that then can help to provide for more eggs and more offspring. So it's not just spurious signal, right? It means something. The quantity of that song and what they're doing with it is an honest indicator of how good a parent or how successful they will be in raising offspring. In addition, here's another one. This is the stripe-headed sparrow. We said the other main function of song besides attracting mates is defending resources. And in this species, females sing a lot to defend resources. They defend territorial resources as a group sometimes. And what's really interesting about this one is that this is one of those species in which females sing more than males do. The majority of song in stripe-headed sparrows comes from females because they do the majority of that territory defense in their groups. And therefore, it's probably, been really selected for within those females. Okay, so back to our definition of female song. Any long, complex vocalization given by birds, especially during resource defense or mate attraction situations, all of that, all of those pieces are very much fulfilled by the songs that female birds sing. And I think this gets back to the idea of why should we study female song? If we're interested in song in general, well, female song is mirroring male song in terms of its form, in terms of its function, in terms of lots of other things that are happening when that bird is singing. So there's sort of as much to mine there potentially, as much to study in the females as there is in the males, and yet we're not doing it. We're really not doing it as much as we should. Okay, so we know it's out there. We know it's relatively common. We understand why females are using it. So what are these species that have female song? Well, if you have been paying attention, I've already mentioned a whole lot of them. So all of these are species that we've talked about so far in this talk. And don't forget these species, all those ones that were the ancestral Australasian species, that were the evolutionary ancestors that had female song. And you'll notice in this group that a lot of these are not North American, but a fair amount of them are. So around here are shrikes and vireos, are species that tend to pretty frequently have female song. In addition, we have all of these orioles, juncos, a good amount of sparrows, etc. However, these numbers that we have, where we say 64% of species have singing females, these numbers are not perfect. I'm going to guess that this is probably an underestimate, although maybe it's an overestimate. I don't really know. The reason I don't know is because the data are lacking. There aren't people out there listening for it, and so it's really hard to judge. If you're trying to figure out, okay, do the females in this group sing, but nobody has ever even listened for that, how do you make a judgment call? Do you decide that they don't sing, or is the lack of data just lack of data, and you can't actually make a decision? That's kind of the problem that people studying female song keep running into. And this number, this graph, actually comes from a study where they tried to look at rates of female song in a whole lot of species. They looked at 4,800 species, and they determined that in 3,500 of those species, in the vast majority of them, they didn't have enough data to make a call. They said this species has not been studied long enough. Nobody's ever looked for it, so we're not going to say it's present or absent just because nobody's ever looked. In the species that do have data, that have been pretty extensively studied, 64% of them, as far as we know, have female song. So this really points to, another big hole in the field, which is that there are a lot of species out there where nobody's ever looked, and we need to start looking. And part of the reason we haven't looked, or part of the reason we have poor data is, as I said, because if you have a species where males and females look the same, it's very, very difficult to tell. And that can be a real challenge. And that, that's something we can't get around. But hopefully if we start looking closely at those behaviors and people really, start at least listening for it, maybe we can make some better informed guesses and decisions about where female song exists. And I think that this is my favorite example that really convinces me that those numbers are probably underestimates. This, as I said, a lot of the data that we have about song in general comes from citizen scientists and comes from scientists who are just reporting on bird song in general. And there is this tendency among ornithologists and birders to assume that singing birds are male. And this species illustrates that really nicely. This is that stripe-headed sparrow where I told you that females sing more than males do. Okay, if you look at what people have put in public libraries, so if you're not a birder, lots of people who are birders record bird songs and then they'll upload them. You can donate them to online public databases, so Xenocanto, or you can upload them through eBird to the Macaulay Library of Natural Sounds. If I search then in the Macaulay Library of Natural Sounds all the things that people have submitted, I can find 32 recordings of song in the stripe-headed sparrow. People have labeled 32 recordings song. Okay, 7 of them were marked male. Anyone want to guess how many were marked female? 0, despite researchers knowing that females sing more than males in this species. So biases are clearly affecting the data that we're getting. And I think that that's really, we don't have perfect numbers. But hopefully if we change those biases and people start to hear that females do sing, and they start to know that in a species like this, a female might be singing, then those submissions to Macaulay are going to change. And so that's why I go around telling people about it, talking to people about this topic. And I do think it's really changing. There have been lots of great new reports of female song in species that people in the past would never have thought females sang. So, prothonotary warblers. Recently, a few years ago, there was a paper that came out showing that prothonotary warbler females sing. That's pretty cool. Just earlier this year, there was a paper that came out that's documented song in female cerulean warblers. Warblers, surprisingly, have a decent number of singing females. And in most warbler species, the female song doesn't sound exactly like male song. This particular research group found that female song was not exactly like male song, but they deemed it long and complex, and they noticed that females were singing it during the mate acquisition period when they were fertile. And so it fits those definitions of what song is for, right? For mate acquisition, long and complex. Hey, we should probably recognize this as an important vocalization. If you want to know what species do have female song, there are some really great resources that can help with this. I know I just kind of ragged on the Macaulay Library and said that their data weren't good, but they're the best data we have, and actually they have lots of really good data. So if you're interested in knowing whether there is female song, you can look at archives like the Macaulay Library and see what's been uploaded there. Also, I think that's a great resource because if you want to start listening for female song and you don't know what to listen for, you need an example, right? You need to know what to listen for. You can go to places like Macaulay and Xenocanto and listen to all the examples that they have in there and look for things that people have marked female. And then you can start to know what female song might sound like so that you can be more aware of it when you're out there in the field. In addition, there's this great field guide. This picture is of the Eastern field guide, but there's now a Western one as well. I don't know if some of you know Nathan Piplo. Again, he's a local Colorado birder, and he's amazing with sound. He's written this field guide in which he shows spectrograms. So instead of having pictures of the birds, he talks about the sounds they make, and he shows spectrograms of their sounds. And he has a whole section where he kind of teaches you how to read a spectrogram. And he did a really wonderful job in that book of including the vocalizations of males and females. So that's an awesome resource. I highly recommend it. There's also Neotropical Birds website and the Birds of North America website. Both of these are run by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And in fact, they're both about to merge. They're merging these two as well as the Handbook of Birds of the World, which was another exhaustive resource. All of them are going to become one thing that Cornell will now manage, and it'll be much easier because you can go to one place to get all your information. So if you go to, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, look for Birds of North America, you can find great information. And we had an effort just last year. I worked with people at the Macaulay Library to get sounds of females into some of these accounts. And I'm very happy, I'm excited that just as of a few months ago, if you go to the Canyon Wren account, it now has an example of a female song in there, listed along with the male songs. I also have a list of North American species that sing. If you're interested, email me, contact me. I'm happy to send you this list. We published it in a paper I wrote with a colleague. This is the title of the paper, which you can look up, but it might be easier to just email me and I can send you that. And there are about 144 species on this list of North American passerines, so North American songbirds that have been reported to have female song. So that's a good number, right? 150 of the songs around here, or species in North America. And then finally, the last, maybe best place is this femalebirdsong.org, which is a website that was put together primarily by Karen Odom and Katarina Riebel and Mike Webster and others. And they really did a great job of documenting female song and showing people how they could participate. So if you're interested in knowing more about female birdsong, you can go there and you can learn, you can see examples, you can basically get lots of information similar to what I have told you today. And you can contribute. So this is where I will say, if you're out there listening to birds, recording birds, if you get a recording of what you think is a female, we would love for you to upload it. You can do it through eBird, you can do it through Xenocanto. This website has all the information about that. Even if you don't get a recording, but you think you see a female bird singing and you're pretty confident of that, there are ways to submit those observations as well. And we would love to have those observations because when I do research, and lots of other researchers use the Macaulay Library, use those resources to search for occurrences of female song. And so the more eyes and ears we have out there looking for it, the better the data are going to be. As I said, it's a big job. We have, 3,500 species that haven't been surveyed. I'm not going to survey them all myself, but if you guys help, then maybe we can make a dent in that, and that would be fantastic. So I will ask you all, please look, listen, document, and then share it. And this website can tell you how best to do that. Okay, so why contribute? Why do I think this is important? I've been talking about that all night, I think. But just to sort of recap some of the big points. I think it's really a great area for study. Song in general, and then female song in particular. It's going to help us understand so much about just the basic biology of song. How do brains control complex behaviors? Birdsong has long been a model for that question. How does your brain control, me speaking to you and you hearing it and understanding it right now? And studying female song will help us get a better handle on that. How is it that complex communication systems evolve over time through the tree of life? And birdsong, again, is an excellent model system for those kinds of questions, right? How do we get these complex, diverse sounds that are all around us in the treetops? And then finally, there are practical reasons that I think we should study female song as well. A lot of people who are monitoring populations of birds and have concern about bird conservation and managing all of the species that we have, one of the biggest ways, or the most common ways that we keep track of populations is we go out and we do point counts, right? Anybody here ever done a point count? Yeah, you go to one place, you stand there, you look and you listen, and you document all the species of birds that you see. And sometimes you don't see the birds, you only hear them. And if what you are hearing is a male or a female, that can make a difference in how you record the data, because we assume right now that everything we hear is a male. And if everything you hear is a male, but the females are singing too, you're going to have really different estimates of the number of birds in that population and how densely they are located. So understanding when and where and how females sing will also help us with protection and population monitoring of birds. So I think it's really important from everybody, from neurobiologists to evolutionary biologists to conservation biologists, to recognize that this has impacts and is a field that's really ripe for study that we don't know enough about. So I will leave you with that plea. Please look, listen, document, share. I want to thank all of my collaborators that have really, that I've worked with for a long time on all kinds of projects relating to this. And then I'll leave you with my contact information. And if you have questions or want to get in touch about any of this, please email me. More immediately, I'm happy to take some questions now if we have a few minutes left. So, thank you.
So microphone pass around. Once again, the microphone's not projecting our voices in here. It's for the recording, so make sure when you're speaking up, you can talk fast so we can all hear your question. Anyone have a question for? Turn it on.
I'm curious about to what extent is birdsong instinctual versus learned, and are things like being on time with it or having a more beautiful song, can those be practiced? Are they
Yeah, great question. And it varies according to the kind of bird. So there are only kind of 3 lineages of birds that we think really learn their songs, and those are the songbirds, parrots and basically just parrots and cockatoos and things, and hummingbirds seem to learn their songs and can change them through life. So other things, ducks, owls, etc., probably don't. It's probably fairly innate and fixed in how they sing. But among the song-learning birds, they certainly can change over their lifetime. And there are lots of different species. It depends on the species, and some learn only during a very early period in their first year of life, and they improve during that time. And then others, like mockingbirds, will continue to learn year after year after year. They'll add new things. So there's a variety of ways that they do it, and it depends on the species. But yes, they certainly can learn and improve over their lifetime. Yeah.
In one of your earlier slides, you had reasons for birds singing other than mating or protecting the life zone, and you had, I would call it sort of extra credit singing. Those monogamous and migratory, and what was the third one?
Yeah, the ones in which you have a lot of female song or duetting tend to be monogamous, non-migratory, and territorial.
Okay. Monogamous,
Yes, non-migratory, and then they defend a territory as well. Yeah.
and territory. So, in my observations of birds that we're singing that fit into those categories that live here year-round, it seems almost like they're singing because they have some leisure time. It's like if you have a time where you don't have anything else to do, why not sing?
Yeah, why not?
It just kind of hit me that way.
Yeah, and It's totally possible. The other thing is maybe they're practicing for, as you say, because in order to get better, there is good evidence that birds practice. There's even evidence that they warm up in the morning. The first few songs they sing in the morning aren't as good as the ones that they sing a little later. Yeah, and so maybe they're practicing, or maybe they're just, yeah, they do have some leisure time. There are all sorts of things, like mockingbirds are known for singing in the middle of the night, which makes no sense, right? And why are they doing that if not just because maybe it's fun for them or it's their instinct? Yeah.
I noticed on the Tree of Life that a very small proportion of birds of paradise were singers. And I was wondering, is that because of lack of data? Is that because of genetic isolation? Or perhaps coloration is more important, or dance?
Yeah, super interesting question. They obviously have amazing displays, as you know, right? They dance, they show off, and I think that they do sing some, but I don't know of them being really fabulous singers. And for that particular tree, I don't know exactly how they collected the data. It might be that they just weren't on the tree because the researchers didn't know enough about their song. So maybe they are singing and the researchers didn't know enough. But my impression, certainly, of birds of paradise is that with those amazing dances that they do, they're not usually doing super complex songs. But I'm not an expert in that group, so it's hard to know for sure. But it's an interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on the microphone, so if you want to go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I like your passion for rigorous definition. And I'm curious, in the slide that you showed the third edition of the Cornell book,
Mm-hmm.
With the definition that was congruous with your definition, was the definition more patriarchal in the second edition?
Ooh, I didn't go back and look at that one. I have looked at others off the top of my head. I can't say for sure what that second edition definition was, but certainly in past textbooks, there are definitions in textbooks that say song is the vocalization that a male makes to defend his territory or attract a mate. But yeah, I should go back and check that edition. Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting, like, cultural, maybe non-science-based bias that is entered ornithological.
It is, absolutely. And as I said, a lot of the bias and the assumption that only males sing comes because, much of that canon of ornithological literature is from Europe and North America, where males do sing more. If the canon of ornithological literature had originated in South America or Central America or Australia, we would not have that impression at all, because in those places females sing all the time, and everyone who lives there knows that. It's just that we, as in North America, sort of think that we are defining science, and sometimes the world around us is not typical of the world everywhere on the globe. And then also, I will say that the majority of early ornithologists were men, and in general, ornithologists study male birds more than they study female birds. It's not just song. There was recently a paper that came out looking at the proportion of male and female specimens in museums. So when people go out and collect specimens from museums, and among birds, which is not true among all types of animals, but among birds, the majority of museum specimens are also males. Yep. And the type specimens, the vast majority of type specimens are males. Yeah.
That's the ones they could find.
Yeah, that's right.
Females were hiding.
Yeah, it might be a matter of practicality. It's not necessarily a bias that people are thinking about. It's just that males are brighter and more likely to respond to playback, and so therefore you catch the males more often. But it does mean they're overrepresented in collections and research. Yeah.
I was just curious, while measuring the bird calls with algorithms and software and whatnot, did you find portions of the song that were in different frequencies that human ears aren't capable of interpreting or hearing?
Yeah, in most of the ones I showed you today, not so much. Hummingbirds certainly have that. They have some super high frequencies that, humans really don't hear. And interestingly, they have frequencies high enough that hummingbirds probably also don't hear it. So why are they making that sound, right? And then there are some species here They have, you might have noticed on some of the spectrograms, there's kind of a main loud sound, and then stacked above it are repeats of that sound, so harmonics of it. And sometimes those harmonics do get up out of hearing range, but the fundamental, the loudest part of the song is usually within hearing range for the species that I showed here.
Have you noticed any cross-species understanding? So just like looking up at these pictures, let's say one of these elk are hearing a bird pretty much every single day, the same birds, very similar territorial songs. Have you noticed any understanding of that across the species?
Yeah, for calls, they absolutely do. So you'll get mixed species flocks of nuthatches and chickadees or warblers together or something like that. And alarm calls of one species are heeded by all the species. So they totally understand each other there. There are even situations where mammals and birds will eavesdrop on each other's alarm calls, yeah, which is really neat. For songs, they do. There are many species, and people usually study related species, but there are species in which neighbors at least recognize who their neighbors are. And if they're defending against another species, if they're territorial against a neighbor who's of another species, they usually recognize that individual of the other species, amazingly, and they know that, oh yeah, that's still Bob over there, I don't need to fight him. Whereas another member of that species comes in, then it becomes more of a fight situation.
We have time for one or two more questions, if you want. I have a question. Are there any species we know of so far where song is existent in female but not male in the species?
That, I don't know of any. Yeah, we know of there are some species in which females sing more than males, but I don't know of any where only the females sing. And if I were going to look, I would start to look at some things, you know, well, yeah, I don't even know where I'd look, actually. I shouldn't say that. But there are some species in which their roles, they're called sex role reversed, where females are the ones who are more dominant, who are larger, who are more aggressive, and then the males are the ones that do most of the parental care. And so those might be the places to really start looking for it. Jacanas, spotted sandpipers, although both males and females sing there. So, yeah.
Spotted sandpiper?
Well, they both call at least. I wouldn't, yeah, maybe I shouldn't call it song. Again, back to those definitions. Yep.
All right, our last question here.
Oh, just a comment. I'm thinking about, you know, a lot of us use apps, and there's really no specific distinction between the songs and calls on those apps. And I think by just raising the awareness on apps, not that you have anything to do with that, might be helpful for all or more people to understand and broaden, you know, our listening abilities.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that would be great to do. And the reason to distinguish, again, as I said, they're really, you know, it's a fuzzy line between them, but the reason to distinguish is that they are used in very different contexts, and it would be great to know, okay, that's probably a breeding signal, or, yeah, good point.
All right, let's give another big thank you to Lauren.